Hi, I'm Phil Harbottle, and this is my 60-second video discussing British science fiction. In recent videos, I've been looking at how 1950s British science fiction had inspired me to create my own science fiction comic strips. This had reached a peak in 1957 when I became completely enthralled by the scores and scores of John Russell Fearn books and magazine stories, which I was constantly still discovering. After reading a second-hand copy of Across the Ages by Outlaw Satin, Sky Unlimited, 1952, in June 1958 I was inspired to begin drawing it as my own comic strip novel in a large drawing book. Then it was inked and coloured with crayons. But after completing the first 5 pages, I found it was competing with other distractions in my personal life. I was now captain of my local tennis club team, Wallsend Park, and helping it to win successive promotions up the leagues. And what with still being in the 6th form at school, this left me little time to continue with it. So I laid the comic aside on the 5th page. But I was still reading and collecting science fiction, not just Fearn, but now the entire range of British and American science fiction authors. Having taken out a subscription to the British reprint edition of Astounding Science Fiction, I was fully conversant with the American science fiction scene. Authors such as Edmund Hamilton, Jack Williamson, Henry Kuttner, A.E. Van Voort, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, Clifford Simak, Ray Bradbury, Theodore Sturgeon, Robert Sheckley, and many others, not forgetting Britain's E.C. Tubb and Arthur C. Clarke. They all became new favourites. But all the time I'd been endeavouring to discover all Fearn's pseudonyms and to collect everything he'd written. In 1959, after learning Fearn's address from his current publishers, I wrote to him outlining my proposal to compile and self-publish a complete bibliography of his work. I listed some 3 dozen or more pseudonyms I thought I had discovered to date, inviting him to confirm and, more importantly, add to them. Fearn genially replied with what he called an interim acknowledgement, stating he was happy to cooperate with me, confirming all but one of my guesses, and volunteering to add some names when he had more time to write again. Some months later, he wrote me with more helpful information, but again it was an interim measure. He promised to contact me again in the new year when I turn out my files. But now that I was in touch again with my idol, I had a great dream. I would become a professional strip cartoonist adapting his best science fiction stories. My plan was that when I had finished the bibliography, I would present him with a copy and then triumphantly reveal my completed graphic novel, Across the Ages, as a sample of what I could do. Confident he would give his permission, in May 1959, as I noted at the bottom of the page there, I enthusiastically resumed work on my novel. I restarted the novel and progressed with it. But having now to study for my final school year examinations, progress on completing the novel was slow. On leaving school that summer, I was obliged to take a clerical job in local government as an interim measure, whilst I continued working on the bibliography and the comic strip. Then, just as I was working on the last few pages, it's near the end of the story, and I'm working on the last few pages, you see here, I learned that Fearn had died suddenly from a heart attack in September 1960, aged only 52. Heartbroken, I managed to finish the strip adaptation, but Fearn's death also meant the death of my own dream to become a professional strip cartoon artist. Across the Ages has already been the subject of two of my videos. See my videos numbers 21 and 39, when I revealed that after 60 years in limbo, thanks to David Whitehead, a viewer of my first video about it, I had finally managed to publish it via Lulu. You see that book here. We've seen before. But my desire to transcribe Fearn's stories into comic strips still burned brightly with me. So I went on to create 3 more stories of increasing elaboration. I now dispensed with crayons and for my new strips, I was now using poster paint, Roni poster paints. You see here the vivid colours of the poster paint. I did this simply for my own satisfaction, with no thought of publication or anyone else seeing the strips. Here we see Twilight Planet, completed between January and May 1961. This was my interpretation of a story in Thrilling Wonder Stories, summer 1946 issue. Let's show you that story. Wilbur Thomas illustration. Twilight Planet. This little story reeked of a sense of wonder and classic science fiction tropes. The story opens with the atomic experiments of a young scientist on a planet beyond Mars. It tells of his atomic experiments and how he inadvertently causes progressive chain reaction. And it describes how, after he's been blasted with cosmic rays, which we'll see on that page there, he's transmuted to evolve into a man of the future. As the mutations proceed, you see him shrinking there, until finally he turns into bacteria. And it's just as a bacterium, he's helpless to prevent the horrifying death of his fiancée, who we see there. There's a city around her is being destroyed by the atomic cancer from the chain reaction. See the end there, when the planet explodes to become what we today know as the asteroids, the asteroid belt. Finally, he becomes a sentient carbon atom, which we see there. He becomes a sentient carbon atom that actually creates life. As the carbon atom actually is responsible for creating life on the planet Earth in the transcendental ending. This story was immediately followed by Outlaw Satin, completed between May and September 1961. This story was from the March 1939 issue of Science Fiction. Bear with me. Find the story. Illustration. '94. That's it. Outlaw Satin, illustrated by Jack Binder. Now this story was a fanciful, fantastic adventure and love story, deliberately pastiching Stanley G. Weinbaum. It was sheer fantasy, just pure entertainment. Set entirely outdoors on an alien planet, I enjoyed drawing all of the artwork completely out of my own imagination. A posthumous collaboration between Fearn and myself, without reference to Frank Hampson or any other strip cartoon artist, just to prove I could do it myself. There's the love story element, which I mentioned. And it has a happy ending. Now, my last story was quite different. Prisoner of Time, which we see here. Now, this came from Super Science Stories, May 1942 issue, and it was completed between September 1961 and August 1962. I'll just have a look at the magazine story. There we see it. Prisoner of Time. There's the villain, which you see there, which I took from the illustration by Hans Bock. That's him. That's the villain. There's one more illustration which we can see. Lovely Hans Bock illustration. Now, as I said, this last story was somewhat different from my earlier ones. This was a longer and more complex story. It was pretty much a condensed novel. In fact, as we see there, Fearn would later expand it into this 1952 Outlaw Satin novel, The Time Bridge. So, in order to do this story full justice as a graphic novel, as well as my own original visualizations, to create the very best images I could, I deliberately took inspiration from many of the strip cartoon and pulp artists I had admired and collected, including the likes of Jack Monk. You see there, my heroine is based on Jack Monk's character Twilight, which some readers, some viewers might remember from the Buck Ryan comic strip. My other influences were Frank Hampson, you see there, especially Frank Hampson. Frank Bellamy, Jim Holdaway, another Hampson inspired car. Ron Forbes, Captain Condor and the Lion. Frank R. Paul, American pulp artist. Hans Bock, we saw that image in black and white, if you remember, in the magazine. Keith Watson. And Don Harley. I was doing the very best panels I could, and I took inspiration from the finest strip cartoon artists who I'd encountered. I put everything into it, and after I'd finished this story, I guess I had nothing else left to give or to prove. This was to be my final self-drawn comic strip, and I rested content. Now, I guess it's human nature for people to do crazy things. Some people climb mountains, run marathons, swim the channel, collect beer mats, build battleships and cathedrals out of matchsticks. I just created and painted John Russell Fearn comic strips. So, was I crazy, or was it kismet? A waste of time, or preparation for the future? Well, don't make up your mind until you've seen my coming videos.